Utena is one of those shows that with each rewatching changes in the perception of the viewer. All the characters have a hidden depth that becomes more clear with each viewing, like a fractal pattern that continuously unravels in infinite detail the further you zoom in. Let's be honest, Utena herself is the easiest to understand character in the show. She's the main character, and nothing about her is hidden from the audience. The only thing that is hidden is what is hidden to herself, namely, her past and the secrets within her heart of which she is not yet fully aware. The main plotline of the show is focused on this process of Utena's self-discovery, so the audience is able to accompany her as if they are discovering these truths on their own. Utena could be said to be the most relatable character in the show, but is this really the case, or is it just that it's hard to admit to relating to other members of the cast? It does frustrate me a bit that in surface-level discussions of Utena, a large portion of the cast is often shrugged off as being bad. With the exception of Akio perhaps, who I'm not really ready to talk about, there are no stereotypical bad characters in Utena, which is one of the things that makes it so special. Everyone is thoroughly human. Out of the characters which are most often hated by Utena fans, besides Akio, Toga and Saionji are probably the top two. I've talked a bit about Saionji's redeeming qualities in my first video, or more so about Saionji's overwhelming weakness, which makes him more of an object deserving of pity than hate. But today I'd like to talk about Toga. The first arc of Utena centers on Toga as the main villain or rival. And on a first watching, one might even assume that Toga is the so-called big bad of the series as a whole. However, it soon becomes clear that of the evil lurking in the depths of Otori Academy, Toga lies at the very surface. At the end of this initial saga, Toga retires to his room for a while to ruminate while listening to classical music, and an arc later is temporarily cured from depression by the thrill of riding around in a car with Akio at night. On a surface level, Toga is a textbook playboy. He treats people like things, and has little remorse for his actions most of the time. But it also doesn't take any deep analysis to realize that Toga is fundamentally unhappy. Just like all the other duelists, he is unsatisfied with the world in its current state and thus seeks revolution through the dueling system. Toga lives his life like a game, not because he wants to, but because in his current circumstances and without drastically changing his personality or retiring from the world entirely, there is no other option. He is an actor just playing his part, and he probably almost feels as if he is doing a service, as this performance is constantly demanded of him day by day, yet he knows that everything about his daily life is fake. Though Toga is not the main character, it could be said that Revolutionary Girl Utena is as much about Toga as it is about Utena, as they are essentially two sides of the same coin. While Utena is faced with the seemingly impossible task of realizing her true self in a social arena filled with people who seek to destroy her and bring her to submission, Toga has his own battle of coming to terms with what he really wants and escaping the nihilism that clouds his life, and for this reason could be seen as a kind of male counterpart to Utena. In the first arc, Toga is enamored by Utena upon first seeing her. It is clear that Toga sees something different in Utena than the other girls who constantly flock around him. He actively tries to seduce her, even when she does not prove an easy target. In the end, Toga resorts to sheer force, winning the Rose Bride through dueling, in an attempt to decisively seduce Utena by demonstrating his masculine dominance, of course failing in the end. Toga is certainly the main antagonist throughout the first arc. He serves as a tempter to Utena, which she has to overcome before advancing to the next stage. But the more I think about it, I feel as though Toga is trying to reach out to Utena in a more meaningful way, yet all he knows is how to play the part of the seducer. Toga is shown to be deeply depressed after being defeated by Utena in episode 12, and he isn't just depressed because of a fish that got away. He most likely feels some mixture of shame for his actions, and disappointment that the glimmer of hope he saw in Utena all came to nothing in the end as a result of his own foolishness. It takes a while, but near the end of the run of the show, we see a slightly changed Toga. In episode 36, on the eve of their final duel, Utena is taken by surprise when Toga suddenly visits her and invites her to go to the dueling arena, apparently to talk about the end of the world. He makes some advances on Utena, but is polite and respects her boundaries. The somewhat melancholy voice performance for Toga in this scene gives off the sense that he is more so playing his part because he thinks he has to, knowing all the while that he will be rejected by Utena. Whether it is for love or admiration is unclear. It is probably a mixture of both. Toga is for this one moment able to unmask himself. He expresses his deep feelings for Utena while understanding that he will not win her over, and in this act is able to give up his well-earned role as a dominant male. In the run of the show, we are given little insight on why Toga became the way he is. The most background we have on his character comes in the form of a flashback in episode 9, where Toga and Saionji are biking home in a rainstorm and happen to come across a funeral. Two adults in suits and glasses see the two and inquire if they have seen a girl anywhere. The reason that most adult characters in Utena are wearing some form of eye covering is that it shows them to be soulless and unimportant. This is reminiscent of Charlie Brown cartoons, where adults are not shown on screen, and when they speak, there is a trombone noise in place of their speech. As the two walk away, they jokingly inquire about if she might have been spirited away. It takes Toga with his child's intuition to find out that she really has been spirited away in a sense, and Toga walks into a chapel with Saionji to find that Utena is hiding in a third coffin next to those of her dead parents. Utena is struggling with the loss of her parents and questions what the point of anything is when everyone dies in the end. Toga is not able to give a satisfactory response to this existential inquiry, though Saionji later claims that Toga somehow saved Utena in this moment. Toga's eyes reveal that he too is struggling with the same existential crisis of impermanence. It might be this very moment when he realizes that he too will someday spiritually die to become a soulless adult like the two they saw earlier, and go on to lead a pointless life. As far as it is demonstrated to us in the show, Toga unwillingly became a sort of nihilist when he ran into this barrier of the seeming pointlessness of life, though in the bottom of his heart he continues to yearn for something better, and thus seeks to revolutionize the world. I haven't talked much or at all about the Utena movie yet, and I might talk about it in the future as the focus of a video. While the movie is something of an alternate universe take on the show, the motivations behind the characters and events of the movie are the same. It is something of a stretch to say the same about the show, but the adolescence of Utena movie is nearly as much about Toga as it is about Utena. The movie gives us a chilling look into Toga's past, and answers many of the questions raised about his character during the show. Please be warned that I'm about to discuss a topic relating to abuse which may be traumatic or distressing to some. In one of the most intense scenes in the entire series, it is revealed to us that Toga was abused by his stepfather as a child. In the middle of an affair with Shiori, Toga begins to discuss how in some sort of shady arrangement, he was abandoned by his real father and sent to live with an abusive predator. He states that as a result of this, he lost many things, but gained the ability to participate in the dueling system at the academy. At this, Shiori changes the subject to how she hopes he will win against Juri, and begins to discuss how gross she finds Juri and the rumor about her pendant. As the conversation goes on, we are shown a mixture of a hallucination where bedsheets become a cocoon and a flashback of Toga being pursued by his stepfather in the middle of a cabbage field. Shiori transforms into a moth situated on a cabbage in the field, and we see moths rising up everywhere around Toga. This scene appears to be a portrayal of Toga's traumatic flashback morphing with the surrounding reality, and it is apparent that he is just barely holding on as Shiori continues her selfish rant about Juri. we see how deeply damaged Toga is as a result of this trauma, and are given an explanation for why he became the way he is. The connection of Shiori to the moths shows how to Toga girls are merely a distraction from the central horror of his life. When Toga says that as a result of this arrangement, he was able to participate in the duelist system, this can be taken as a metaphor for how Toga's current social status came only at a terrible price. There is another mystery to Toga's past, which is hinted at in episode 39 of the TV series, and taken up as a major theme in the movie. The story has a few variations, but the first version related by Judy is that her sister fell into a river as a child and was saved by a boy, who instead ended up drowning himself. Judy states that she always thought her sister was cold for not remembering the boy's name, but without realizing it had forgotten the name herself. Before the finale of the movie, Utena wanders in a building reminiscent of that of the Black Rose Arc and enters an elevator, and on the other side of a glass wall, Toga faces her in another elevator. Utena recounts a similar story of how she saw a boy save a girl drowning as a child. We are shown a flashback where Utena sits on a bench as this girl is drowning. Toga returns to the bench after fetching some drinks, and it is heavily implied that he attempts to save the girl. There are also contradictions to this, as Utena also recounts how Toga consoled her later that evening as she cried in a chapel, but at the end of the scene, water begins to rise on Toga's side of the glass, and he disappears into a void, implying that he was the one who tragically drowned. Toga seems to be an idealist at heart, but his present self is like a ghost, just living through a routine as a sort of escape from the pain of his past. At the end of the adolescence of Utena, Toga apparently disappears as though he was a ghost all along. Whether he is literally a ghost or not is unimportant. It's enough to say that he is like a ghost. In the movie, through the story of the drowning boy, it is implied that Toga made a great sacrifice in the past for the sake of an ideal, and this sacrifice may have involved his own death and/or helping Utena in some way. In the show, on the other hand, it is implied that Toga was not able to do anything for Utena when she struggled after the death of her parents, as it was ultimately her desire to save Anthe which gave meaning to her life. In both cases, however, it is apparent that Toga's greatest fear is the fear of a meaningless life, and he is well aware of the fact that he is not the main character, unlike Akio or Saionji, who are completely full of themselves. It is for this reason that Toga desires to sacrifice himself for the sake of a greater purpose. While he can be seen hanging around Akio frequently, and appears to even help Akio out on numerous occasions, it seems to me as though he is secretly rooting for Utena all along and is actually acting as a sort of double agent. It's almost as if Toga has consciously infiltrated this secret world of Akio's in order to warn Utena of its danger, and he does warn her at the end of their final duel in episode 36. Toga knows he appears as a sort of bad person, but being an idealist at heart, I'm inclined to believe that Toga sacrifices himself and his pride in order to help Utena in the end. There is a lot more to be said about Toga and his relationship to the other characters, but it's too much to all fit into one video. For the sake of this video, I wanted to capture Toga's essence, and I hope I succeeded to some extent. Toga is a double agent and has the spirit of an assassin, and I thought I would make him the perfect dish to fit his personality. So here is spaghetti all'assassina, or assassin spaghetti. I first saw this dish on YouTube, but decided to make it my own way, so I hope no Italians are offended by the way I make it. With a base of sautéed onions and garlic, we actually fry the pasta in the oil before adding the tomatoes, and later add a bit more water to fully cook the pasta. By cooking the sauce along with the pasta this way, you achieve a deep red color, just like Toga's hair and his uniform. Don't forget to add plenty of red pepper flakes, as this dish should be fiery just as Toga is passionate. I also like to use soy sauce instead of salt, as this gives the dish an even deeper umami. This actually came out really good, but I would probably recommend you use a recipe if you're not too experienced with cooking. I know it's been a while, but I hope you enjoyed the video. As a rule, my uploads are pretty sporadic, but I hope to keep making these when I have a good idea and motivation. Have a great day, and stay tuned for the next video, which could be in a few weeks or a few years.